Forget the leg warmers and synth pop for a second. Picture 1980s New York City, but instead of Wall Street titans, we're diving into the shadows of Chinatown.
Yeah, deep shadows.
Where a Vietnamese street gang with this really chilling name, Born to Kill, was making a surprising and pretty brutal impact.
It's just, the whole setup is fascinating, isn't it? How this group, mostly first-generation Vietnamese immigrants,
Right.
how did they not just survive, but actually, forcefully carve out territory in New York's already packed, really competitive, organized crime scene?
Okay, so let's unpack this. It's a really unexpected chapter in New York's history, yeah.
Really?
This is our deep dive into the Born to Kill gang, also known as BTK, sometimes the Canal Boys. And our mission here is to really get a handle on how they rose up, what they did, and the forces that eventually brought them down. We're drawing on a pretty detailed historical overview for this.
Exactly. And their main turf, you got to picture Manhattan's Chinatown. Their peak, really intense, but relatively short, like 1980 to 92, maybe.
A brief window, but whoa, they made waves.
Oh, yeah.
Impactful is almost putting it mildly. At their height in NYC, maybe 75 to 100 members.
Somewhere in that ballpark, yeah. And probably more outside the city, but those numbers are, well, they're fuzzy. Hard to pin down.
And their criminal activities.
Yeah.
It wasn't just one thing.
Not at all. It was incredibly diverse. You've got the sort of expected stuff, like drugs and weapons trafficking.
Sure.
But also really sophisticated operations, counterfeiting, even grimly contract killing.
It really covers the spectrum.
Yeah.
Extortion, racketeering, which, that's like a whole pattern of illegal stuff under one enterprise.
Right. The whole umbrella term.
Prostitution, money laundering, robbery, fraud, and, murder. And like any big players, they had rivals. Big ones.
Oh, yeah. Mainly the Ghost Shadows and the Flying Dragons, established groups.
Okay, so where did this all begin? The genesis of BTK. There's a central figure, right?
There is. The Wahong David Tai, born in Saigon, January 30, 1956.
His backstory is, wow, it really hits home, the human side of conflict. After Saigon fell in May 75, he was a refugee.
Left Vietnam with his father, Du Tai, made his way to the U.S., spent time in, believe it or not, a Lutheran church boys' home in Lafayette, Indiana.
Indiana. That's
Yeah.
a long way from Saigon. And then New York.
Yeah, Indiana was temporary. May 1976, he heads to New York City with just like $150.
Just $150. That's starting from scratch.
Totally. Experienced all that upheaval, and now he's doing basic jobs. Busboy, dishwasher, the tough work a lot of immigrants face, building a new life.
And he tried to build that life, right?
Yeah.
Got married in 78 to another Vietnamese refugee.
He did. But it seems like money troubles, just financial hardship, might have pushed him towards crime.
So that's the turn.
Looks like it. In 83, he had a brief stint with a group called the Vietnamese Flying Dragons. Did some robberies, apparently never got caught for those.
Okay. But he didn't stick with them.
No. And here's where it gets really interesting, kind of unexpected. He leaves the Flying Dragons and starts his own thing, a counterfeit watch business.
Not just a business, though.
No, a highly profitable one. We're talking multi-million dollars.
Wait, multi-million? From fake watches? How does someone go from dishwasher to that? That's a huge leap.
The overview doesn't detail his exact business plan, unfortunately, but it definitely points to some serious, maybe ruthless entrepreneurial skill, illicit skill, obviously.
Illicit skill, obviously.
And that money. That became the seed.
Absolutely pivotal. Because in the mid to late 80s, you had more Vietnamese youths arriving in New York. A lot of them felt isolated, ostracized, even within Chinatown. Some were homeless.
Really vulnerable situation.
Exactly. And Tai steps in, uses his watch money to help them out, gives advice, cash, a place to crash.
So he's building loyalty, dependence, maybe.
Precisely. Whether it was genuine kindness or just, strategic maneuvering, probably a mix.
Yeah.
He became the central figure for these lost kids. That was the foundation, the core of what became Born to Kill.
It really shows how vulnerability can be leveraged, right? Even to build something criminal. So how did this group actually rise up in the underworld? Well, timing seems key. Late 1987, law enforcement really cracked down on the established Chinatown gangs.
Like the Ghost Shadows.
Yeah, Ghost Shadows, United Bamboo, big racketeering busts weakened their grip. It created a kind of power vacuum.
And nature abhors a vacuum.
Yeah.
Especially in organized crime.
You got it. And Tai was perfectly positioned. He focused his energy and his crew on controlling Canal Street.
Which was already buzzing because of his counterfeit watch trade.
Exactly. So Canal Street becomes their main base, their headquarters, effectively.
So the fake watches weren't just making him rich, they were bankrolling the gang's early muscle, their expansion.
That's the picture, yeah. The fuel for the fire. Initially, they were just known as the Canal Boys. Pretty straightforward name.
Makes sense. Territorial?
But then, 1988, they adopt the new name, Born to Kill.
That name. It's something else. Where did it come from?
It's chilling, right? Apparently taken directly from a slogan painted on U.S. helicopters in Vietnam.
Wow.
And sometimes seen on soldiers' helmets during a war.
So they're taking a symbol from the very war that displaced them and turning it into their identity. That says a lot.
It really does. A kind of fusion of, I don't know, victimhood and extreme aggression.
Yeah.
And they definitely lived up to it. They got a reputation fast in Chinatown for, the term used was criminal audacity, meaning they were bold, took risks, confronted the established gangs head-on in a way that was pretty unusual.
And the name itself, it's spread.
Yeah, that's another striking thing. Other smaller Vietnamese groups, maybe seeing BTK's success or just wanting that same intimidating image, they started using the name too.
So it became like a franchise or a loose network.
Sort of a loose confederation, yeah. It helped expand their reach, at least in name, to other cities, states, even up into Canada.
But not all centrally controlled by Thai.
Right. Important distinction. Some groups were probably direct affiliates, but others might have just been labeled BTK by police or media without a real formal link back to Thai's core group.
But that core group, it remained these young Vietnamese men, many with similar backgrounds.
Overwhelmingly, yes. Shared experiences, you know? Leaving Vietnam, the refugee camps, tough times in foster care maybe, then finding this sense of belonging, however twisted, in the gang.
Did they have, like, a hangout, a main spot?
Seems like it. The Pho Hanoi restaurant right there on Canal Street, mentioned as an informal HQ, place to meet, plan things.
There's that theory, isn't there? That the chaos they might have experienced back in Vietnam, guns, drugs, somehow prepared them for this life, made them more effective, maybe more ruthless.
It's a heavy thought, but it's out there. How past trauma and environment can shape future actions, even criminal ones.
And it's important to remember they weren't just slotting into the existing Chinese criminal structure.
No, absolutely not. They were outsiders challenging that structure aggressively.
And Thai himself.
Yeah.
He really did transform Canal Street, didn't he? With the counterfeit goods. Made it a global tourist spot, ironically.
He really did. That initial watch business laid the groundwork for this huge illicit market.
And their early role, sometimes working for the established groups.
Yeah, initially there's mention of them acting as muscle. For the triads, the big Chinese syndicates or local gangs like the Flying Dragons.
But that didn't last.
Nope. They grew more powerful, distanced themselves, and eventually started challenging the triads' authority directly. That shows real ambition. And confidence, or maybe arrogance.
So late 80s, early 90s, that's their peak.
Seems to be. Widespread extortion. Reports say they were shaking down maybe 70 shops around Canal Street for protection money.
70 shops, wow. And Thai's personal haul from the watches.
His claim was $13 million. In 1988 alone.
$13 million in 1988 dollars. That's staggering.
Phenomenal money. And it wasn't just watches and extortion. He was involved in other big ventures, too.
Oh, what?
Operating a large brothel, apparently with some funding from the American Mafia.
Really? Connections to the Mafia?
That's the report, bringing in Southeast Asian women for prostitution. And allegedly, Thai would trade some of the gang's robbery loot with the Mafia, suggests, some level of interaction between these different crime worlds.
So their reputation grew beyond just Chinatown.
Oh, yeah. Robberies, extortion, murder, known throughout the city. And that turf war with the ghost shadows got really violent. Lots of conflict there.
It sounds like they quickly cemented themselves as one of the most violent Asian crime groups in New York's history at that point.
That's the reputation they earned, yeah. And they were shifting, too. Moving beyond just street gang stuff into more organized crime. Drug trafficking, murder for hire. More sophisticated, more dangerous.
Okay, let's dig into that a bit more. Their operations, their expansion. Who were the typical members? Who were they targeting?
Members were mostly young guys, teens, 20s, some as young as 15, reportedly, but also guys up to maybe 35.
And the targets on Canal Street?
Primarily the business owners. Restaurant guys, shopkeepers, merchants, the people trying to make an honest living there, they were the ones getting extorted.
And recruitment.
Yeah.
It wasn't just Chinatown itself. You mentioned Bronx Science.
Yeah, that's an interesting detail. Reports of recruiting near Bronx High School of Science suggests they were casting a wider net than just the immediate neighborhood.
Any estimate on numbers again? Around, say, 1990?
Yeah, July 1990, the estimate for active members in NYC was around 80.
But even as things maybe started to heat up for them in New York, they were active elsewhere.
Definitely. By October 92, even after major arrests, factions were still operating. Georgia, Canada, places like that.
It shows how these things can splinter but persist. This rapid growth.
Mm.
It really highlights something, doesn't it? How sometimes marginalized groups can, well, unexpectedly build significant power.
It does, and the peak numbers, including those scattered groups, might have hit 100 just in New York, plus chapters popping up in Jersey, California, Texas. Their influence spread incredibly fast.
Do they have a look? A way to identify themselves?
Oh, yeah. Tattoos were a big thing. The initials BTK, often with a coffin and 3 candles.
Subtle.
Not exactly. Meant to symbolize, no fear of dying, projecting that image.
And their style.
Very much an adopted gangster look. Dark sunglasses, black suits. The spiked hair was apparently characteristic. It was all about looking formidable, intimidating.
And when they expanded, did they just set up anywhere or follow patterns?
Seemed to follow Vietnamese communities, largely.
Yeah.
Cities like Biloxi, Mississippi, or Dallas, Texas, with established Vietnamese populations, saw BTK activity.
Do they do the same things everywhere? Extortion, watches.
Not necessarily uniform. Activities varied. Like in Sacramento, California, reports mentioned computer chip theft. That's different.
Less street level.
Right. But also selling guns to young Vietnamese guys there, so still dangerous stuff.
And Georgia seemed like a pretty significant spot for them, even later on.
Yeah, Atlanta, Doraville area.
Yeah.
Reports of activity there as late as December 96. That's well after the main leadership in New York was taken down. Shows resilience or maybe just fragmentation.
So the decline. What was the main catalyst? How did this powerful, expanding group get dismantled?
The big turning point seems to be August 1991, the arrest of David Tai himself.
The founder.
Yeah, and several other top guys. Busted at a safe house out on Long Island in Melville. And apparently it was Tai's first arrest ever.
His first. After all that must have sent shockwaves.
Had to. A major blow. And the legal hammer came down hard afterwards. April 1992, 7 key members convicted. Federal racketeering charges.
RIC charges.
Those stick.
They do. And the sentences were heavy. Most got between, 13 and 60 years. Serious time.
And Tai.
Tai and 2 others got life.
Life sentences. Okay, that's effectively cutting the head off the snake.
Pretty much decapitated the leadership, yeah.
So what happened then to the rest of the gang, the organization? Did it just dissolve?
It seems to have largely collapsed without that central leadership. The belief is that many of the remaining leaders who weren't caught, well, they scattered, relocated possibly to the Versailles neighborhood in New Orleans.
New Orleans. Trying to regroup, maybe, or just disappear.
Could be either. Try and lie low, start over, maybe rebuild on a smaller scale. The historical overview doesn't specify their fate there. Okay, so let's wrap this up, this deep dive. We've tracked the really rapid, often brutal rise of Born to Kill.
Yeah, from this small group of refugee youths.
Led by David Tai's ambition, maybe his ruthlessness.
To become this major violent force in Chinatown and then reaching way beyond New York. All in a pretty short time frame.
And the surprising elements really stand out, don't they?
Definitely. That name, connecting back to the Vietnam War, their audacity in challenging the established gangs, and the sheer scale of that counterfeit watch business.
The illegal empire funding the violence? It's quite a story.
It really is. These weird juxtapositions.
And it does make you think, doesn't it, about how these big global events like a war and displacement can intersect with individual drive or desperation and create something totally unexpected, a powerful social phenomenon popping up in one city neighborhood.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, what other hidden histories, what other underground currents might be shaping things around us right now, stuff we're just not seeing on the surface?